Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everybody. Welcome to the SOS, the Shout Out Show. Me, your host, Preacher Moss. Order of business. For people who are coming for the first time, we want to thank you. Appreciate you spending your time with us. For those who attend the program on the regular, I appreciate you. May Allah bless you. Please keep coming back and bring some more of your friends. Remember, brothers and sisters, hit that bell, the subscribe button, that lets you know that when we have new shows that are coming up. But you don't really have to hit that hit that bell, because we go daily. We're almost like the Muslim Waffle House, 7 days a week. So let's get to our topic here today, because there's a lot of things to unpack, and I need to give some background to what I'm going to be talking about. A Black Muslim perspective on anti-Semitism. Let me say that again. So if anybody's listening, you heard it here correctly. This is the Black Muslim perspective on anti-Semitism. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because we've had two issues, not necessarily with African-American Muslims, but African-Americans who have, I guess, run afoul of the lobby for Jewish sensibilities. The first one be Desean Jackson. He's a wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles. He posted some things, and when I read what he posted, it was out of context, and it was attributed to the wrong person, the wrong quotes, the wrong person. You got to do your homework, Desean. He apologized and moved on. The larger one is interesting. The larger one is a young man. His name is Nick Cannon. I don't have a personal relationship with Nick Cannon. I used to see him at the Improv back in the day. He was a young guy, man, full of energy, full of bounce. Overall, good dude. I mean, he showed up at the Improv on his graduation day because that's how much he really loved comedy, brothers and sisters, from high school. Nick Cannon had an interview on a show called Cannon's Classroom. That's what it's called, Cannon's Classroom. And he interviewed somebody. His name's Professor Griff. Background, Professor Griff used to be the road manager for Public Enemy, and he ran into some situations when he was assessed with saying some things that were perceived as being anti-Semitic. Okay. Nick Cannon is in the same boat right now. He's been perceived as being anti-Semitic, and Viacom has basically fired him from his job. His vehicle, which is called the Wild Out Show, which had been 16 years on MTV networks, had been yanked. And I mean, when I say yanked, I mean that new episodes are supposed to come out. They've been replaced by the Fresh Prince. It's a total wash. Nick Cannon is, for all intents and purposes, done. There's a question about what he said. Now, I'm going to tell you, I started watching the interview between he and Professor Griff. And it was about the 23-minute, 21-second, 24-second piece where they began to delve into some things that, if you're scared, or if you're scared, or if you don't know what you're talking about, it's very spooky talk. And it's interesting because it's almost the conversation they're having we are listening into. And what I realized is something that scared me a little bit, because I remember conversations, and people don't understand the scope of two black men talking in the United States. The scope of two men talking in the United States. In fact, going back to the slave days, it's a well-known fact that slaves would have to sing while they worked and toiled and killed themselves in the field, picking cotton, all those things. They would have to sing all day long. And it's not because they wanted to sing, but it made the overseer feel good, because in singing, they couldn't do code. They couldn't speak code about rebellion. They couldn't speak code about running away. They couldn't speak code about anything. So, that was the scope of it. And it seems now, and I was watching this, and it reminded me of two of my favorite comedians. I'm going to give you two of my favorite comedians, Nipsey Russell and a guy named Mantan Moreland. And I would watch them as a child, and they would finish each other's sentences. A beautiful sketch. I still laugh at it today. But the interesting thing was, when I met Nipsey Russell some years ago before he passed away in Milwaukee, and I started to talk about him and Mantan Molan doing the space, he stopped me. And he said, "How old are you?" I told him how old I am. He said, "You don't really understand that space of television." I said, "Really?" He said, "No, you don't understand that at the time we were on stage, pay attention, at the time we were on stage back then, we weren't allowed to talk to one another unless the white audience could listen." And I was like, "Really?" He said, "No, two black men could talk to each other. The audience could listen." He said, "But even more so, we weren't allowed to talk to white audiences." Now, some of y'all don't know this, and I'm gonna bring it up because it needs to be said. Back in the old days with the Chitlin Circuit, you had situations and scenarios where people they weren't allowed to express themselves. Let me give a shout out. What's going on, Sister Reed? Assalamu alaikum. People weren't allowed to express themselves. And what is interesting is, as I bring this up, we're in a situation whereby you have to delineate this whole situation. Is it insensibility to Jewish culture, or is it cancel culture? Are we really in the space now of cancel culture? Because back in the day, when these artists would run around or tour and things like that, black people had their own tour. It's called the Chitlin Circuit. It was called the Chitlin Circuit, but the Chitlin Circuit it wasn't it was black artists performing for black people, but they didn't own the theaters. And the people who own the theaters, call it what it is, they're mostly Jewish. They were mostly Jewish. And from owning theaters, they were able to control the artists. Okay. That being said, that's just business. They used to call it Toba. Toba, and pardon my language. The old performers, and Nipsey Russell told me this. He said, because the guys at the theaters, my Jewish brothers and sisters are extremely hard on black artists, even though they were performing in front of black people. They had to go through these channels. They had to get permission. And it was due to the fact that they own the theaters. You own the talent, but we own where you're going to display your talent. Okay, fine. The name of it, catch the name of it, was called Toba. 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 And Toba, he gave me the name for it, something black artist. He said Toba to black artists meant tough on black asses. That's what it was called. Tough on black asses. And so you have a situation, a scenario, whereby here artists trying to express themselves have their own agency, but it's compromised because they don't own the facilities or the platforms. And I could really, really understand that, and as a Muslim, as an African-American Muslim, you have to be wary of that. It can't be a situation where people don't want you to know who you are. When I say this in the Muslim community all the time, don't tell me who I am. I already know. Don't tell me who I am. I already know. If you don't like who I am, that's your problem. But you can't change me. And some of this cancel culture is really designed to make sure that you change yourself, that you somehow resurrect yourself. In a way, when I say resurrect, in a way that people find appealing. Because we talked about, give a shout out to two sisters, Sister Janet Tuff all out in Seattle. Good to see you. And Sister Layla Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum, sisters. But it's interesting because in the Muslim community, we've undergone it and we don't talk about it. Someone asked me one time at an airport, they said, what happened to Allah Made Me Funny? And for one of the few times, I'm actually going to tell this story. So pay attention. It was a new definition of Toba. It was a new definition of Toba. Allah Made Me Funny had gotten to the point where we were doing okay. We were independent for a lot of years, and someone introduced us to some agents, and the agents were Jewish. That wasn't the problem. We all got along. And, we were trying to do shows together. And me, I guess I'm the rebellious one. The other two, whatever, you are, you are. They don't ask questions. I ask questions. So, for lack of a better word, there was a situation where I had a group from Northern California who wanted me to perform. Now, this was a masjid, African-American masjid, and everybody knows how I do for our brothers and sisters. I try and make it work however we can. The sister called me up very, very upset. Well, she called me up and I said, go to my manager. She went to the manager. 2 weeks later, she called me really upset. The manager never called her and never returned the email. She's extremely upset. I called the manager. I said, hey, this sister had called you. What's going on? He said, well, when we asked her about what she could pay, we didn't feel it was enough. So we just didn't respond. Excuse me? He said, we, not a conversation between he and I, or the managers and I, or the group and the managers. Simply, we didn't think it was enough, so we didn't respond. Now, everybody knows about Allah Made Me Funny, and if you know anything about me, brothers and sisters, I am a community comedian. I may not be wealthy, but I'm rich. I've spent time, invested, and have love come back from this community. But listen to what the man told me with a straight face. We didn't think it was enough, so we didn't respond. Meaning that, wait a minute, you work for me. I have the content. You're supposed to help sell the content. But in this case, you're making decisions based off of what you know and not who I am. And the brother and sister called me and she faced me down about who I am, like you didn't respond. And I apologize to that sister. Later on, there's a situation whereby, and this happens all the time, and I'm not going to call this, we call it being anti-Semitic in some regards. In some regards, it's just people who are very, very secure about who they are. Right? You talk about being anti-white. In some regards, it's just people really, really secure about who they are. And I remember this one particular time. Pay attention, because this is moving pretty quickly. And I'm going to put this up here from sister. Thank you, sister. Appreciate you. There was a situation, again, about money, but it was less about money. I take that out. My managers, and there was 3 of us in the group, it was 2 managers. The managers would stop talking to me. They stopped talking to me. And we stopped talking around the fact that they felt that they were owed 20% of my colleges. So whatever I bought in college, they wanted 20%. Not that they ever made a call, a book of college, went with me to a showcase. And I simply told them no. I said, no, I can't do that. Well, give us 10%. I said, I can't do that. I said, my agent gets this amount. If I give you your amount, so I'm literally giving away something I spent a lot of time building. I said, if you build something of value, if we build something of value, you can take your 20%. I'm good. They stopped talking to me. The weird part was they started talking to the other members of the group. And I will never forget this, because it almost came to some physical stuff. The Muslim in my group accused me of being anti-Semitic. The Muslim in my group, not the actual people who were Jewish, and it really wasn't an issue of that. I just stood my ground. I can't say I had anything about them being Jewish. It had nothing to do with them being Jewish. It's about business. You don't like the way I do business, then just fire yourself. We're cool. I don't owe you anything. You don't owe me anything. But I'm saying this because my brothers who I love was so afraid of the managers that the managers could freely talk to them and tell them out of their mouth that I was anti-Semitic. Herein lies the problem. It's not about being anti-Semitic. It's about what you can get when you frame people to be a certain way. And this whole idea of We're all from the Abrahamic faith. We all know that. If that is the case, then why are the divisions? This is something that Nick Cannon talked about, and I'm going to ask everybody to go to the YouTube and watch Nick Cannon's class with Professor Griff. Now, yeah, he said some things that were like, "Ooh, you can't. That'll make sense." And I would question myself. I would question it. I would debate it. But this is a situation when we're talking about information, not agitation. See, because when you put people in a box, you are causing them to react one way. You're going to react forward, or you're going to respond. There's no space for dialogue. And in our own Muslim community, let's call it, we are afraid of being framed as anti-Semitic. I'm talking to you as a man who I've never had any problems with Jewish people, Jewish friends. However, in this case, people who knew me less than 4 months framed as being anti-Semitic simply because I said no. Now, is there a place, a reality for anti-Semitism? Absolutely. Just like being anti-Black or homophobic or anti-Muslim. These are all realities. However, you can't pick and choose when you decide to make someone a racist, make someone anti-Semitic, make someone anti-Muslim, make someone anti-homosexual. You can't pick and choose according to your preference and what it gains you, what allows you to secure. And I'm like, this man has probably lost, I don't know, $70-80 million. And I looked at the conversation, and this is something when you're watching this stuff, he generally in his heart wanted to have a dialogue about what the problems are. He generally in his heart, he didn't just talk about Jews, he talked about Black people, how we react and how we're messed up in some regards and our own dysfunction. Nobody talked about that in this interview. They pulled out the space. And it was easy to do because Professor Griff, if you go back and do your homework when he was a public enemy, he laid out a lot of stuff that at the time was considered anti-Semitic. But it was information. And the idea is not that it happens in a closed space, brothers and sisters, it's that it happens in a broad platform where, God forbid, people can learn from the conversation. Did Nick Cannon deserve to get fired from his own show? I'm not a business person. I would say no. But this is a situation where people didn't want an apology. And we have to be honest that some folks don't want an apology. They want advantage. I've been accused of being anti-gay. Why? Because somebody told me one time, you know what, Preach, the civil rights movement was just like the gay rights movement. And I said, the hell it is. And he said, you don't think so? I said, hell no. Next thing you know, Preacher Moss was anti-gay, homophobic. Where did we get to this point? Where do we get to a point where people have the audacity or people feel like they have the privilege? Because that's the other thing. There's privilege in branding somebody anti-Black or anti-Semitic or anti-gay. Because when you say it to folks, it's what I call a first user advantage. You get it out there first. And once you get it out there first, everyone else is catching up. You have to be extremely careful. Extremely careful. Even in the Muslim community, I've had some people say, sadly, I was anti-Semitic. Why? Because I didn't disavow the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And there was a reason why I did. I said, if you expect for me to listen to everything you say and take it 100% as word, then that makes me a fool. I know I'm not perfect, thus you're not perfect. I'm not saying I agree with everything, but a man who's 87 years old, brothers and sisters, has seen a lot of life. A lot of life we may never see in our lives. A lot of life that he probably would like to forget. But he remembers America in a certain way that none of us will ever be privy to. I'm not saying, he has, but he has knowledge. Because in America, what we don't do is we don't talk to our elders. And when we do have our elders, we're so busy trying to be hip and cool, and we don't call our elders wise or sagely. We call them old, stubborn, out of date, irrelevant. We call them all these names, and they're not. We laugh at them because they do things the same way. Well, they do it the same way, obviously, because it works. Obviously, because there's benefit to him. Let me give a shout out to him, man. Earth, hope you're feeling better, brother. Get out of that hospital, man, please. But we put into a place where there's a space for cancel culture. We now sit as a Muslim community scared. We now sit as a Muslim community scared. We can't even say words that apply to us. The Black Muslim community is in such a fray, we can't even say words like anti-racism. Until George Floyd, we were stuck with saying the word, and it was two thoughts out of a Black Muslim mouth. They either said it was anti-Muslim racism or anti-immigrant racism. Anti-Muslim racism, anti-immigrant racism. We just got back to the point we can say anti-Black racism. Book it. I'm not lying to you. And these are the things we have to look at. So when I'm talking about anti-Semitism, literally, are we talking about positioning and strategy, or are we talking about seriously looking at offending somebody's sensibilities? Because I'm going to be really, really clear. To commit an act of anti-Black racism, it is distinguished. It is distinguished. You know why? Because people are horrified. Because when it happens, it's people are emboldened. They're not there to apologize. It had intention and specificity. And it's no different than anti-Semitism. It can't be that I'm an anti-Semite because you don't like or agree with what I said or the way I said it. My truth is my truth. Your truth is your truth. We have that in the Quran, right? So I'm looking at this and I'm saying, hey, Muslims, particularly Black Muslims, you need to wake up. Because this is a very, very weird game. And we're in a really even difficult place now with the protest movement that are around. Because now you have people in Black Lives Matter that can call you anti-Black or anti-Black trans or anti-Black whatever, anti-gay or anti-lesbian. And that whole anti is meant to discombobulate the fact that we all have a right and an expectation to be treated with respect. The anti allows for a gray area and say, well, you didn't treat me with respect this way or that way or this way. I remember I was a job one time and I said something to a young lady in the morning, young white lady. I was just starting my career out after college. And I said, hey, good morning. And my supervisor came down. He said, hey, man, I need to talk to you. I said, why? He said, you're harassing one of the staff. I said, well, harassing who? He said, you spoke to this young lady. And I said, what do you mean? He said, what did you say? Just tell me what you said. And I remember I said, hey, good morning. He went back to this woman and she said, that's the way he said it. He said, that's what he said? And she goes, yes. She said, what's the problem? She goes, I didn't like the way he said, hey, good morning. I could have lost my job. My career could have been ruined because somebody didn't like the way I said, hey, good morning. And we have to be very, very careful, extremely careful, because this is a blueprint, a pattern, if you will. This is how people attain power. This is how people hold on to power. So it's not enough that I disagree with you, but I have to make sure that I break you down and let everyone know this strong person right here, I broke him down. I'm going to make him apologize. I'm going to make him backtrack. That's that cancel culture. See, that's not anti-Semitism. And if you really, really want to know the truth, folks, it comes from the fact that, you know what? We're not putting out strong people anymore. We're not raising our kids to have strong opinions anymore. We're raising them to get in where they fit in. Whatever the boss say, you go, okay, boss. And that's what happens. This is what happens when you raise a whole nation of house Negroes and house Muslims. The field Negro is the one that's always going to be held out as something's wrong. Not that I have morals or courage or discipline. It's the fact that by me not wanting to be in that house, I present a threat. One of the saddest stories I ever read was an issue of anti-Semitism against another Jewish person. Meaning this group of Jews were anti-Semitic to another Jew. And this was a Jew I loved. It was a black Jew. His name was Sammy Davis Jr. Sammy Davis Jr., who, after a very serious accident, almost life-threatening accident, he converted to Judaism. And a lot of people back in the day gave him a hard time. I know black folk gave him a hard time, but he said, this is where my heart is. And he loved Judaism. He went to Bethlehem. He went, he did all of it. And in his lowest of low, in his spiritual low, he wanted to go to Israel as a citizen. And they told Sammy Davis Jr., no. And they said, why? He said, because you don't have a birthright to the land. He said, but I'm Jewish. They said, yeah, but you're not really Jewish. And I'm saying, whoa, is that the depth of how it goes? So I'm saying, even in that space, there's a gray area that's not clear. There's a gray area with a lot of rules, and people feel free to make up the rules. Every year we talk about Palestine, but we separate it from religion. We separate it. This is justified, this is not justified. And I know I can get in trouble about talking about Palestine. Well, hell, talk about it, because I'm going to talk about it as a man. Wrong is wrong. And if I look at you mistreat those people over there, when you come over here, you're going to think you can mistreat me too. Wrong is wrong. And I'll stand on that. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. If you're wrong, you're wrong. But I'm going to be a man about it. We can't look the other way. I can't worry about, how is this going to affect my career? Or how's it going to affect my opportunities? And sadly, that's because I don't worry about it. And sadly, because I grew up a man. I grew up a Muslim man. I had a strong father in the house. I had a strong mother in the house. When I took my Shahada, I was around strong black Muslims who told me, bump all of that. This is what the Quran says. This is what the Sunnah says. Follow that. And the beautiful part of it was it wasn't tied to human behavior. This was a code, if you will. This was a code. This was a manual that allowed me to be a man. And I'm saying, brothers and sisters, that even though we talk about anti-Semitism, it can't be the thing where we run away from. It can't be the thing where we just tighten up on. You want to know about anti-Semitism? Do your homework about Semitism, not the anti part. What does it mean to be Semitic? And do your homework on that. And have an argument about that. Have a discussion about that. Just like they did on Nick Cannon's class on YouTube, where he talked about, and he and Professor Griff talked about, the whole aspect of Semites. That was the danger. Putting out that information, you're no longer like Nipsey Russell. You're no longer like Mantan Moreland. The people in the audience are listening to you, and the people in the audience look like you. And that was the thing that scared everybody. That's the thing that scared Viacom. That's the thing that scared a whole lot of these businesses. Yes, BET, Black Entertainment Television, is owned by Viacom. So here we are going through a filter process, if you will, having to go through checks and balances. It has to clear. When you say things in these spaces, it has to be cleared by the censors. You know what the problem was? And I'm going to let you go on this one. Because the true twisted aspect of anti-Semitism is that it's meant to make sure wherever you go, wherever you ask, or wherever you go, wherever you do. I'm talking about the twisted anti-Semitism as a crime, as something against humanity. That is it. Pure, you know what that looks like. But as a strategy, no, I don't accept that because it's primed and it's positioned to make sure wherever you go in life, not just you, your children, your family, your job, your career, where you move, it's framed around the idea that you're always going to have to ask permission. And if you read the statement from Viacom about Nick Cannon, they said he refused to apologize. Brothers and sisters, I'm done, and I hope this was received well. If it's not received well, you will never see an episode of the ShOUT show again. I ain't worried because Viacom doesn't own me. I'm a free thinking man, and everybody that comes to the show, I thank you for being free thinkers. But think about what we just talked about. And watch. I watched the first 25 minutes of Nick Cannon's interview. And I saw with some parts, it was rocky. This is a young guy. He's espousing some things, some correct, some not correct. So what? We have a person in the White House that lies every day, still in the White House. No cancel culture going on there, huh? I wonder why. All right, brothers and sisters, take care of yourself. Thank you so much for tuning in to the ShOUT show. I appreciate you. We have some big things coming up as we speed towards our 100th show. We are on episode 82 today, and I want to thank everybody for making this possible. Inshallah, I pray that this is received well and correcting with the right intent. Like the brother said, if it's good, it comes from Allah. If it's bad, it comes from me, and I need to work on myself. But my point is stop loving Muslims, but stop being weak. Stop being weak, because that's where this thing is coming from. Like I said, blood in the water. If you're weak, people they're gonna go after you. And I'm not talking just about anti-Semitism. I'm talking about Muslims in our own community. Muslims in sheep's clothing, or I should say, sheep's in kufis. And I'm just saying that because it speaks to the human condition. And when that doesn't work, that's when it becomes specified, and that's anti-Black and it's anti-Semitic. And these are strategies when not used correctly. So that's it. Shout out to everybody. Appreciate you. We had some people. Altaf Rashid, Miss Shiak, Layla, of course, Jabir Ali, Big Ped Cavallo, Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, Janice, to Umar, Professor all the way from Raleigh. Listen, you guys have been great. I got to go because I'm hungry. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.